Those of you who don't know me, my name is Carolin Telford, and I'm a chaplain in a school normally, so I'm very delighted to be with you this morning. Now that your annual emotional audit of New Year's resolutions is out of the way, do you fancy living a second life? A new life? Is this one not quite cutting it? Not a second life in some far-off pie-in-the-sky religious kind of way, but one you can begin right now. A life that will involve your creativity, energy, fantasy, some but not too much of your money, more an investment in yourself, you could say, and a helpful amount of your spare time. Well, help is at hand. All you have to do is invest in the hardware and software and sit yourself down in front of the console. You can play out your fantasies, design a more interesting, physically alluring, successful version of yourself, and live a second life through him or her. Maybe you'd like a new career as well. You might want to sell real estate to other players of the game, or hire yourself out as a designer of apartments. Such earning opportunities do exist. All is possible in the parallel world of Second Life. It's hard being a human being, isn't it? And now that we're at the end of the festive season, has Christmas really helped? Maybe you have concluded once again that all the presents and baked hams in the world are not offering any real comfort, or the possibility of life changing for the better. Maybe you have actually started playing Second Life because the particular constellation of circumstances which define this one make living every day a tough call. As we journey through Christmas and into Epiphany, we are offered the gift of many gestures toward what life lived fully and well might be like. The familiar stories all involve risky journeys and change. Mary accepting the risk of an unplanned and unconventional pregnancy. Joseph and Mary on the move for the census. The shepherds leaving their fields and following the advice of the angels to go and see why that star is shining so brightly over Bethlehem. Lots of dreams and lots of attending to them. And then we come to the story particularly for us here on this day, at this turn in our lectionary wheel of retelling and reimagining. The story of those who journeyed the farthest, the story of the Magi. The Magi were perhaps members of an ancient priestly caste, astrologers, astronomers, practitioners of arcane arts, skilled in magic. Maybe they came from Persia, modern-day Iran. These wise men appear only in the Gospel of Matthew, and he proclaims in their coming the fulfillment of prophecy. Precise biographical details are few. Their number has been extrapolated from the number of gifts they brought. There could have been 2 of them, or many more than 3. They laid down enigmatically significant offerings, gold fit for the king they had discerned they would be welcoming, incense burnt as a religious offering in honor of a life to be offered up in service, and myrrh, a herb used in the anointing of bodies of the dead. Many artists have found there a story an engaging one to envisage, and the homage of the Magi, or the adoration of the kings as it is also known, the flight to Egypt of Jesus, Mary and Joseph, and what became called the slaughter of the innocents of Bethlehem, ordered by Herod, are common themes in Western artistic tradition. Images of the 3 Magi even appear painted on the walls of the catacombs in Rome. Over many centuries through, or at least in parallel with, the elaboration of their visual identities, the sparse biblical account became garlanded in the popular imagination with significant new details. It seems a bit like a medieval game of Second Life played out by artists, or maybe more accurately by artists acting on the instruction of the patrons and commissioners of the artworks. The paucity of biblical detail gave them and gives us license to tease out the story. Epiphany derives from epiphaneia, a Greek verb meaning to appear, used to refer to the manifestation, the appearance of dawn, or an enemy in war, and especially of a deity to a worshipper. I read once that over 30 different sites in our brain are engaged when we look at something, when we see something. So central is our sense of vision to our comprehension of reality that we say, I see, when really we mean, I understand. What did the Magi see and understand? What did all those artists see in this story? And what does their vision offer us on this day of our Epiphany? The wise men evolved into recognizably kingly figures themselves, first wearing special pointed caps, interestingly later adopted as symbols of authority by the Doges of Venice, and later on wearing crowns. They were given names and habitually shown with different skin colors and can be identified as having begun their journeys in different places. Caspar from Arabia, the Oriental Melchior, and dark Balthazar from Africa. One is a youth, one a mature man, and one is much older. They gradually came to represent every seeker, every man willing to go on a quest and follow a star and look and risk radical change. They were usefully pressed into service as a convenient but non-confrontational motif of temporal power, bowing low before a religious authority at various times in history when church-state tensions ran high. Their presence perhaps came to endorse wisdom seeking truth, obedience to a call, willingness to follow the light, and having the courage to journey on from one place, one way of seeing, to another. Evelyn Waugh wrote of them, "You are patrons of all latecomers, of all who have a tedious journey to make to the truth, of all who are confused with knowledge and speculation, of all who through politeness make themselves partners in guilt, of all who stand in danger by reason of their talents." We do not know what Herod the Great looked like. Almost uniquely among ancient rulers of his time, he commissioned no busts of himself. His likeness appears on no coin. Whether out of personal conviction or in calculated political deference to his Jewish subjects, Herod took seriously the commandment prohibiting graven images. There is no incontrovertible evidence that he ordered the massacre of the children 2 and under in Bethlehem, but he certainly did arrange for the murder of several close relatives, including 3 of his sons. There is a historical basis for believing that in the last decade or so of his long reign, Herod suffered from a medical condition which caused increasing paranoia. Perhaps paranoia over which he had no control clouded his vision so that he couldn't respond with anything other than denial to the evidence standing in front of his eyes that the locus of power was shifting. In his informative book, The Life and Times of Herod the Great, Stuart Perowne offers his judgment that Herod suffered from the defect the Greeks knew as anesthesia, from which we get our word anesthesia, a lack of perception. The story we retell today is an invitation to us to avoid that same defect. The wise men devoted themselves to following what light they saw in the passionate hope of that light brightening to illuminate their understanding of who they were and how they were to live. They had the courage to journey on from one way of looking and understanding to another. Jesus, just a baby in a stable, was a life-changing revelation to them. After their journey to the crib, informed in a dream not to retrace their steps and return to Herod, the wise men changed their plans. Their dogged persistence had reformed them and made them wiser. The gift they lay at our feet is their epiphany, their willingness to perceive this world with eyes wide open to new, different, risky ways of being and understanding and living. It is the gift of every day, this day, living fully this life that is ours. Up until a few years ago, I was living in England, and when I was there, I used to go to a Green Belt festival. Some of you may have attended Green Belt festivals yourselves. It's a kind of opportunity for creativity and music and God-centered thinking and worship and connection to happen, and it's usually a lot of fun and very stimulating. There are equivalents elsewhere around the world. At one of those conferences, I wandered into a tent, because there are always these amazing speakers. I wandered in, and there was a chap sitting in a very kind of unassuming way in a corner, talking, just sitting on a chair, talking, and everybody was listening. And so I started to listen as well. And I didn't know who it was at the time. I realized subsequently that it was John O'Donoghue, who, those of you who are familiar with John O'Donoghue will know that he was one of those people who was so illuminated by the love and the light of God that his whole being was kind of just a sort of beacon of a vision of how life really is at its heart. A very connected and amazing person. And he's written quite a lot of his writings down, I think really because people wanted him to, rather than a desire to see himself in print. But one of his collected, very beautiful books is called Benedictus, good words, as it were, words of blessing. And I'd like to conclude by reading you one of those. It's entitled, At the End of the Day, A Mirror of Questions. And of course, we're not at the end of our day, we're in the morning of it. It's an opportunity to sort of hold these questions perhaps in our minds until this evening. And it's also kind of appropriate, I think, because we are at the end of the Christmas season and the beginning of something else. It's one of those kind of threshold places. So this is At the End of the Day, John O'Donoghue, A Mirror of Questions. What dreams did I create last night? Where did my eyes linger today? Where was I blind? Where was I hurt without anyone noticing? What did I learn today? What did I read? What new thoughts visited me? What differences did I notice in those closest to me? Who did I neglect? Where did I neglect myself? What did I begin today that might endure? How were my conversations? What did I do today for the poor and the excluded? Did I remember the dead today? Where could I have exposed myself to the risk of something different? Where did I allow myself to receive love? With whom today did I most feel myself? What reached me today? How deep did it imprint? Who saw me today? What visitations had I from the past and from the future? What did I avoid today? From the evidence, why was I given this day?